October 14, 1943. The second Schweinfurt raid. We lost too many friends. Within an hour, the sky was nothing but smoke and burning B-17s. The Germans came from every direction. We fired back, but it wasn't enough. They had the advantage. They knew our fighters couldn't follow us deep into Germany. The feeling was like walking into a slaughterhouse. Excerpt from the diary of a B-17 pilot, 8th Air Force, written the day after what would later be called Black Thursday, that autumn of 1943, high above central Germany was the moment when the U.S. Army Air Forces seemed on the brink of collapse. The European skies had become a killing ground. The flying fortress formations, the B-17s once advertised as nearly invincible, were now falling from the sky, one after another. Hundreds of burning wrecks trailed long scars of smoke across the heavens like fiery meteors. Every American pilot and gunner knew they were flying into a death trap where the Luftwaffe held total control. The Germans had more than Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf F-190s, fighters that had already terrorized London and the Russian steppes. They also had tactics refined and perfected through years of combat. They knew the rule. American escort fighters, P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings, lacked the range to go deep into Germany. Once the escorts turned back, the bombers were alone. That was when the Luftwaffe's Wolf Packs struck with ruthless precision. Adolf Galland, General of Fighters, told his staff coldly in September 1943, "The Americans will have to stop at Aachen. Their fighters cannot cross the Rhine with the bombers. That is their limit, and that is our chance. When the P-47s turn back, we will be waiting to tear their B-17s apart squadron by squadron." Galland was right, at least at that moment. In August 1943, during the twin raids on Regensburg and Schweinfurt, the Americans lost 60 flying fortresses in a single day. Each carried 10 men, pilots, gunners, engineers, all highly trained for months. In one morning, hundreds never returned. Casualties of 20–25% per mission were so staggering that even U.S. commanders began to doubt the entire strategy of daylight precision bombing. In October 1943, during the second Schweinfurt raid, those doubts became grim reality. Of 291 bombers that set out, 60 never came back. 650 crewmen were killed or missing. It became known as Black Thursday. After that disaster, the U.S. temporarily halted deep penetration raids into Germany for 4 months. The skies, once envisioned as the battlefield that would break German industry, suddenly closed. At that moment, both Americans and Germans believed the Luftwaffe had won air superiority, and that Germany only needed time to rebuild its war production. What Galland and his pilots did not realize was that across the Atlantic, another war machine was stirring, not forged of steel, but of mass production and a remarkable blend of British technology and American industry. For in those very months, in factories across California, Texas, and Detroit, a new fighter was preparing to take flight, the aircraft that would rewrite the rules of aerial warfare, the North American P-51 Mustang. Few knew that the Mustang was not originally designed for America. In 1940, as Britain reeled from the Battle of Britain and faced invasion, its purchasing commission placed an urgent order with North American Aviation. In just 102 days, the prototype NA-73X was born. But the early Mustangs, powered by the Allison engine, were disappointing at high altitude, precisely where bomber escorts were most needed. The breakthrough came in 1942. When Rolls-Royce test pilot Ronald Harker suggested fitting the Mustang with the Merlin engine, the same power plant that had made the Spitfire legendary. The result was astonishing. An aerodynamically advanced American airframe, combined with the robust power of the Merlin, produced an aircraft that was fast, high-flying, and capable of a range no German pilot thought possible. To grasp its revolutionary impact, one must imagine those dark months of late 1943. When the B-17 pilot penned his desperate diary entry, he could not have known that only weeks later, for the first time, American bombers would fly deep into Germany with escort fighters at their side, all the way to the target. Nor could he know that this change would mark the beginning of the Luftwaffe's downfall. In his December 1943 diary, German pilot Oberfeldwebel Heinz Knoke wrote, "The Americans have a new fighter. They are still with the bombers even when we reach Solingen. We cannot understand how they can fly so far. We are all stunned. None of us were prepared for this. That shock was more than technical. It was strategic." From 1940 to 1943, the Luftwaffe had grown used to the rules of the game. The Allies could bomb, but deep inside Germany, they would be alone. Suddenly, in a matter of weeks, the rules were gone. That same winter in Berlin, Galland bitterly reported to Göring, "If they truly have this fighter in large numbers, then the air war is lost for us." Yet at the time, the Germans did not believe it. They thought the Mustang was a rarity, too few in number to matter. They did not understand that behind the P-51 stood an entire nation mobilized, assembly lines capable of finishing a Mustang in 90 minutes, and a training system where every American pilot had logged more than 400 flight hours before combat. Over the frozen skies of Germany, as B-17s burned and American crews scrawled trembling diary lines, "We are down to only a few ships. No one knows if there will be enough left to fly tomorrow." They had no idea that salvation was already on the way, in the long, slender wings of the Mustang. The question remains, how did an aircraft, once dismissed in its early days, manage to transform the air war over Europe in just a few months? And what would happen to the Luftwaffe when the very rules of battle it had relied upon were suddenly turned upside down? In September 1939, when the first shots rang out in Poland, no one doubted that the Luftwaffe was Hitler's sharpest weapon. Within weeks, the German Air Force had crushed all resistance in the skies. Stuka Ju-87 dive bombers, their Jericho sirens wailing like funeral horns, spread panic among the Polish troops. Above them, agile and precise Messerschmitt Bf-109 swept the skies, shooting down anyone who dared take off. From that moment, the world understood that modern warfare had entered a new era, one in which air power could decide the fate of the battlefield. This power became even more apparent. During the Blitzkrieg through Western Europe in 1940, in just 6 weeks, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France fell. Much of this success was thanks to continuous Luftwaffe support. German panzer divisions on the ground were never alone. Always overhead were dive bombers cutting through enemy defenses. The Germans called it the Steel Dance, where tanks and aircraft moved in sync like a deadly symphony. But the pinnacle of Luftwaffe pride came in the summer of 1940, the Battle of Britain. For the first time in history, an entire nation placed its fate on the wings of its air force. The world watched as British Spitfires clashed with German Messerschmitt Bf-109s. In the opening weeks, the Luftwaffe ruled the skies like gods. In August 1940 alone, the Luftwaffe flew over 15,000 sorties and shot down nearly 500 British aircraft. Many German pilots became aces in a matter of days. Adolf Galland, just 28 years old at the time, downed dozens of opponents and was personally praised by Göring as a hero of the Third Reich. German media magnified these feats, and images of confident pilots adorned with glittering Knight's Crosses became symbols of an invincible Germany. German pilot Helmut Wick once wrote to his family, "We are no longer ordinary men. When we take off, we become the Führer's eagles looking down on the tiny earth below. The English resist, but they are just trembling sparrows under our talons." That proud rhetoric was not exaggerated. In 1941 and 1942, as Germany launched Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union, the Luftwaffe continued to assert its dominance. In the first week of the invasion, they destroyed more than 4,000 Soviet aircraft, most on the ground. Soviet airfields became steel graveyards with hundreds of blackened fuselages scattered across the plains. Entire Red Army air units were wiped out in hours. On the Eastern Front, German pilots became living legends. Erich Hartmann, the Black Devil, began his journey to become the greatest fighter pilot in history with 352 confirmed kills. Günter Rall, Gerhard Barkhorn, Walter Nowotny all set unprecedented records, downing hundreds of aircraft during their careers. No other air force in the world produced so many super aces. For them, every sortie was a hunt. The Germans called the sky the Reichsluftmeer, the Empire's air ocean. And in that ocean, the Luftwaffe were the sharks. They attacked from all directions with precision so cold it was terrifying. American pilots later recalled, they appeared like storms of steel. One moment we were in tight formation, the next, the entire formation was burning. They tore through us like knives through paper. The numbers alone were staggering. In 1942, the average survival rate of an RAF bomber pilot on missions over Germany was just 25 sorties. That meant in about 6 months, most pilots would be shot down, captured, or killed. No one said it aloud, but deep down, everyone knew they held a one-way ticket. When the U.S. entered the war in late 1942, it brought a strategy of daylight precision bombing, hoping to destroy German industry more effectively. But the cost was unforeseen. In 1943 alone, the 8th Air Force lost over 2,500 bombers over Europe. Tens of thousands of airmen never returned. Many American pilots wrote in their diaries, "We flew into Germany like sheep into a slaughterhouse. You know the wolves are waiting. You know many will never survive, but you still have to go." From the other side, the Luftwaffe only grew more convinced of its impenetrable strength. Goering once declared at a Berlin ceremony, "As long as the Luftwaffe exists, no bomb will fall on the Reich capital. We are the shield of the Empire." Though later considered one of the most famous miscalculations of the war, in 1942-1943 it made sense. The Luftwaffe truly struck fear into anyone entering German airspace. The disparity with their opponents was stark. The British had the Spitfire, excellent at close range, but lacking the endurance to escort American bombers. The Americans had P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings, powerful, but still unable to reach deep into Berlin. That meant when B-17s and B-24s flew beyond the Rhine, they were alone. And when alone, they became easy prey. A former German pilot later recalled, "When we saw them turn back, the American escorts, we knew it was prime time. Like hunters spotting a straying deer. We struck in waves. None escaped. No orders were needed. We all understood. This was the hour of terror." During the first 4 years of the war, from Warsaw to Stalingrad, from Rotterdam to Schweinfurt, the Luftwaffe haunted the skies of Europe. They believed themselves thunder gods, unmatched in strength. With hundreds of victories, legendary aces, and pride nurtured by propaganda, the Luftwaffe entered the end of 1943 believing the skies of Germany were untouchable. And then, from the western horizon, a new silhouette appeared, sleek, slender, yet harboring unprecedented power. At first it was dismissed as a curiosity, but within months, all of Germany would learn that even the gods could be brought down from the sky. What happens when absolute confidence in invincibility is challenged by an unprecedented adversary? And when the wolf pack of the Luftwaffe meets the Mustang, who will truly dominate the skies of Europe? In the winter of 1943, as the German forests were blanketed in snow, a new sound began to echo across the skies. It was not the familiar roar of Bf-109s or FW-190s, nor the thunderous drone of B-17s. It was the crisp, powerful hum of a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine mounted on a perfectly aerodynamic airframe, the P-51 Mustang. Few knew that the Mustang had nearly never existed. Originally designed for the British in 1940, it was just an ordinary fighter, incapable of high-altitude combat against the Luftwaffe. But when British engineers tested fitting a Merlin engine into the Mustang, the results stunned everyone. Suddenly, it could reach speeds over 700 km/h, climb easily to 9,000 meters, and, most importantly, carry drop tanks, extending its range to nearly 2,000 km. What did this mean? For the first time, the U.S. 8th Air Force had a fighter that could fly from England to Berlin, escort bombers, fight the Luftwaffe, and return safely. On December 13, 1943, during a bombing mission over Kiel, the first P-51s were deployed. At first, their numbers were small, just a few experimental squadrons. But German pilots immediately noticed something unusual. Oberfeldwebel Heinz Knoke, a Luftwaffe ace, wrote in his diary, "We saw a strange aircraft. Long fuselage, slim wings, terrifying speed. I tried to chase it, but it climbed faster than I imagined. Just when I thought it would break off, it turned back and fired from above. I cannot understand how it could be here, hundreds of kilometers from the German border. The surprise was not merely technical, it was psychological. For 4 years, the Luftwaffe had relied on the rules of the game. American escorts could only reach the Rhine, beyond which lay German territory. Now those rules vanished. The Luftwaffe's eagles realized that no matter if they flew as far as Leipzig, Hanover, or even Berlin, the Mustangs stayed on their tail, relentless. For American pilots, the difference was almost miraculous. Lieutenant Robert Johnson recalled, "The first time I looked to the left wing and saw a Mustang still there as we crossed the Rhine, I couldn't believe my eyes. We were used to being abandoned, but now, for the first time, we were not alone." The Mustang's presence quickly proved decisive. In January 1944, during a mission against Brunswick, P-51s for the first time actively attacked German fighters instead of just escorting bombers. They hunted and destroyed their opponents. The result? The Luftwaffe lost over 30 planes in a single day, while the Americans lost fewer than 10. The disparity became increasingly obvious. The Mustang was not only faster than most Bf-109s and FW-190s at high altitude, but also astonishingly maneuverable. It could roll, dive, and pull up without losing speed. American pilots compared it to a glove that fit perfectly, comfortable, responsive, and intuitive. In a combat report, one American pilot wrote, "Flying the Mustang feels like riding a wild horse, but completely under control. It is fierce yet loyal, and most importantly, it brings you home." Meanwhile, the Germans gradually realized the balance was shifting. What had once been a hunting ground, American bombing raids, had turned into a death trap. Famous aces like Walter Nowotny and Egon Mayer faced increasing danger. They could no longer approach B-17 formations with ease as Mustangs appeared suddenly, from above or from the sun. A Luftwaffe pilot bitterly admitted, "We used to be the hunters. Now we have become the hunted." Confusion spread throughout the Luftwaffe. They had believed the Reich was safe, that Berlin could not be bombed. But in March 1944, for the first time, Mustangs fully escorted a bombing mission into the German capital. Air raid sirens wailed across Berlin, and as residents looked up, they saw not only American flying fortresses, but hundreds of Mustangs circling above, ready to engage any German fighter that dared take off. The shock even struck Göring, commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe, who exclaimed in a meeting in Berlin, "When I looked out the window and saw Mustangs escorting all the way to Berlin, I knew the war was lost. Yet at the time, a major question remained. Could the Luftwaffe, with its experienced aces and fierce fighting spirit, turn the tide? They still had thousands of aircraft, radar systems, airfields, and a massive propaganda machine. In early 1944, the skies over Europe grew tensely charged. German pilots knew that each sortie was a gamble against the Mustang. Yet they still took to the air, still fought, believing they were the last shield of the Reich. The question was no longer whether the Americans could bomb Berlin, but whether the Luftwaffe could survive the storm of Mustangs increasingly dominating the sky, or if they would be swept away like fallen gods. The first sound was the unending roar of thousands of engines. In the gray skies of February 1944, the heavens over Germany trembled with the propellers of B-17s and B-24s charging forward. Big Week, the fateful week, had begun. On February 20th, 1,000 American bombers, escorted by nearly 900 fighters, penetrated deep into the Reich. Their targets were not only industrial cities, but the very heart of German aviation, the factories producing Messerschmitts, Focke-Wulfs, and Junkers, the wings of the Luftwaffe. From the ground, Germans looked up to see a wall of steel filling the sky. Dark clouds of anti-aircraft fire erupted, mingled with the long wails of air raid sirens. At airfields around Leipzig, Regensburg, and Brunswick, Luftwaffe pilots scrambled into cockpits, checked harnesses, and throttled engines to the max. They knew today would be unlike any other. In their headsets, The sharp voice of a commanding officer rang out, "Achtung! Bomber formation at 12 o'clock, altitude 6,000 meters. Prepare to engage!" Immediately, hundreds of Bf-109s and FW-190s surged skyward, noses aimed at the American flying fortresses. Many were barely 19 or 20, some having never scored a kill. Yet they charged, following a clear order from above. "Stop them at all costs!" The sky quickly became a storm of steel. Mustang 50 caliber rounds swept through German formations. B-17s and B-24s unleashed defensive fire in unison. Machine guns rattled, metal collided, and debris rained down like a hail of sparks. A young German pilot, Unteroffizier Karl Heinz, scribbled a few lines in his diary before takeoff. "Tomorrow I may not return, but if I fall, I hope I have held a piece of the sky for my parents and sister." He never returned. Karl Heinz's aircraft was shot down by a Mustang shortly after climbing. His 109 exploded across the snow-covered fields. During the 6 days of Big Week, the Luftwaffe lost over 350 fighters and, more importantly, around 100 veteran pilots, leaders who had guided and protected younger men in battle. Many Staffel, squadrons, lost their commanders entirely. The Luftwaffe's training and organizational systems began to fracture. The Americans also suffered losses, over 250 bombers shot down, but with their industrial capacity, replacements arrived within weeks. Hundreds of new Mustangs rolled off assembly lines in the U.S. and England. The balance of power began to tilt. March 6, 1944, marked another milestone, the first fully Mustang-escorted bombing mission over Berlin. 660 bombers stretched for tens of kilometers, surrounded above and around by hundreds of Mustangs. As the engines roared over the capital, Berliners witnessed an unprecedented sight. American bombers circling above the Brandenburg Gate, Adolf Galland, legendary ace and Luftwaffe fighter commander, personally led forces to intercept. In a report to Göring, he wrote, "We were overwhelmed 3-1. The Mustang has speed, altitude, and fuel advantage. I was pursued for 50 kilometers. This is no longer combat. This is slaughter." It was the first time a Luftwaffe leader publicly admitted their advantage was gone. After Berlin, American tactics changed dramatically. They no longer simply escorted bombers, they hunted. Mustang squadrons broke from formations, dived straight into German airfields, strafed runways, and fired on aircraft still on the ground. On April 13, 1944, 42 Mustangs of the 4th Fighter Group, after completing their B-17 escort to Schweinfurt, suddenly descended on Bavarian airfields. In 30 minutes, they destroyed 51 aircraft on the ground, damaged 23 more, and killed dozens of mechanics and technicians. Bases once considered safe havens became junkyards of twisted metal. Ace Johannes Steinhoff bitterly wrote in his diary, "We are no longer the dominant force. Every takeoff is a gamble. We are gradually disappearing from the skies of our own country." The numbers were brutal. May 1944, Luftwaffe lost over 25% of its strength in a single month. New pilots had only 160 hours of training compared to over 400 for Americans. While the U.S. produced over 15,000 Mustangs, Germany struggled to maintain about 1,000 operational fighters. The roar of the Mustang became a nightmare. German farmers called them Schwarzer Tod, Black Death. Children trembled in bomb shelters as the rattle of automatic fire cut through rail lines, destroying coal and food trains. The morale of German pilots steadily collapsed. A grim joke spread through units. "Want an Iron Cross? Ask a Mustang to escort you to the grave." From the glory of 1940-1941, the Luftwaffe now faced only desperate missions. They knew they were being blocked, gradually erased. And with each passing day, the Mustang hammer fell harder, deeper. After Big Week and the Berlin raids, no one in the Luftwaffe believed their dominance could return. An era had ended, and the signs of collapse had become irreversible. By the summer of 1944, the skies over Europe had changed color. Gone was the glory of the Luftwaffe. Gone were the days when Nazi Germany could confidently proclaim, "We control the air." Now, anyone looking up saw only endless trails of white smoke, the paths of thousands of American and British bombers, escorted by squadrons of Mustangs, brazenly flying deep into the Reich almost unchallenged. The Luftwaffe, once the terror of European skies, had become a shadow of itself. Every day they lost dozens of planes, dozens of pilots, and most importantly, hope. This collapse was not just a military issue, but a spiritual crack spreading through the entire Nazi war machine. In June 1944, as the Allies launched Operation Overlord and stormed Normandy, the Mustangs appeared like tireless knights of steel. They not only dominated the skies over the beaches, but swept through the French countryside, hunting every convoy, train, and bridge of the Wehrmacht. A German soldier in Caen wrote, trembling in his diary, "Moving during the day is suicide. Mustangs are everywhere. We hide in forests, in villages, but even there the engines roar, as if the sky itself has become the enemy's eye." The consequences became even graver in autumn 1944. Germany tried to deploy its last trump cards, the Me-262 jet, the V-1 and the V-2, Hitler's wonder weapons, to turn the tide. But whenever a Me-262 took off, a Mustang waited in the skies, attacking at the jet's weakest moment, during takeoff or landing. Advanced German technology was powerless against overwhelming numbers, especially when those numbers were fully protected by Mustangs. During the brutal winter of 1944-1945, as Germany launched its desperate Battle of the Ardennes, the Mustang once again proved decisive. Clear skies followed snow and rain, and hundreds of P-51s swooped down on German columns, ripping supply lines apart, burning vehicles, crushing the last hopes of the Wehrmacht. A German commander later admitted, "We didn't lose on the ground. We lost in the air. No fuel, no supplies, how can we fight?" Day by day, the Luftwaffe sank deeper. The remaining ace pilots, those who had shot down hundreds of aircraft, became lonely warriors. They led untrained rookies into battles with predictable outcomes. Some were shot down on their first mission. Others were torn apart on the runway. By the end of 1944, statistics showed the average life expectancy of a new Luftwaffe fighter pilot was only 11 days. Meanwhile, Mustang pilots and American airmen grew stronger. Names like George Preddy, Bud Anderson, Chuck Yeager became legends. They recalled missions as a complete contrast. One side confident, proactive, the other desperate, hunted. The impact was felt beyond the battlefield. German cities gradually became seas of fire. Hamburg, Cologne, Berlin, all were carpet-bombed by B-17s and B-24s under the unbreachable protection of Mustangs. Every bomb that fell not only destroyed buildings, but extinguished the belief that Nazi Germany could endure. By 1945, the Luftwaffe existed only on paper. Airfields were flattened. Fuel was depleted. Survivors were either captured or perished on hopeless missions. 16- and 17-year-old boys were thrust into cockpits, only to become fire falling to the ground. On May 8, 1945, Nazi Germany officially surrendered. In many Mustang cockpits, the scent of gunpowder still lingered. The skies of Europe were silent, yet the echo of their engines remained. The Luftwaffe, once a symbol, had vanished, and it was clear that its disappearance was inseparable from the shadow of the P-51 Mustang. The lesson of this confrontation went far beyond the number of planes shot down or pilots killed. It revealed the harsh truth of modern warfare. Spirit, courage, and skill mattered, but nothing could replace industrial strength and logistics. The Luftwaffe had legendary aces and daring technology, but Germany lacked fuel, steel, and manpower to sustain it. Meanwhile, the U.S. had vast assembly lines, endless fuel, and Mustang knights of steel to turn industrial advantage into absolute superiority in the skies. The legacy is bitter but clear. The Luftwaffe's defeat heralded a new era. Every military campaign in the latter half of the 20th century proved that whoever controls the skies controls the war. The Mustang was not just a plane, it was a steel proclamation for a new era of warfare. Air power was no longer support, it was decisive. Today, people still admire the courage of German pilots and remember the legendary aces who fell. But they cannot deny, from Big Week to Berlin, from Normandy to the Ardennes, It was the Mustang that turned the Luftwaffe's arrogance to dust. In the memory of the century, the skies over Europe in 1944-1945 were gray smoke and silver streaks. Smoke from burning cities and shattered dreams. Silver, the metallic flash of Mustangs circling like the scythe of death. And when World War II's door finally closed, one cold, undeniable conclusion emerged. In a war of steel and blood, it was not spirit, but industry that determined fate.